Holy City Center Radio is episode 322, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. Welcome back to the program. Happy to have you here, and looking forward to getting into the latest news. In fact, I don't want to waste much time here at the beginning because we got to get into some updates about some things that have been going on. Nothing really going on in my life that is of interest to any of you. I'm trying to think real quick. No, it's been pretty quiet, but just been doing work, watching all sorts of football, pro and college. College basketball season started. NBA's been underway for a while. So there's always some kind of sports thing going on, especially now that college basketball is in full swing. I'm enjoying watching my UConn Huskies, of course, although there was a little rough patch for the men's basketball team. For those who know anything about men's college basketball, they didn't do so well in the Maui Invitational. But hey, if you're gonna play poorly in a early season tournament, Maui's probably the place to do it. At least you got that nice surrounding, to enjoy yourself. But other than that, not much going on. If you're looking for some events, whether it's this week, this weekend, or next month and beyond into the new year, go to holycitycenter.com/calendar. A lot of New Year's Eve events have already been announced. They're on there. There's more coming every day, it seems like. So if you're looking for New Year's Eve plans, you might want to go take a look at that calendar. Go ahead and scroll over to December 31st and see what's out there. There's certain parties every year that sell out. So you may want to get on that early if there's a particular venue or type of event you want to go to. But without any further delay, let's get into the latest news. Dozens of emails that were procured through an open records request from a prominent Democratic state house leader are starting to shine a little bit of a light on the relationship between state education superintendent Ellen Weaver and PragerU, a right-wing organization that has created video content for South Carolina's social studies classrooms. Yes, this is an update to a story I've talked about a few times. PragerU, we'll get back into what they are. They were signed, or whatever the appropriate terminology is, to have their content available in South Carolina schools. They made whatever this deal is with the superintendent, Ellen Weaver, who herself made no, she wasn't hiding the fact that she herself is a right-wing, not politician per se. I mean, superintendents shouldn't be politicians, but she basically ran as one, when they were in the most recent election. And so it made sense that, she would search out a program like this. And there was a lot of questions about it. And now we're starting to get a little bit more information. And that's thanks to State Representative Jermaine Johnson, who is from Richland County. He recently spoke to the Post and Courier and let them know about an initial review that he had done of emails and some other records that show a lot of the correspondence between Weaver, Department Attorney Robert Cathcart, and PragerU. And he's not convinced that he has all the communication. So an open records request, you sometimes hear it called FOIA, which is when you can request records through what's called the Freedom of Information Act. That's what FOIA, if you take that acronym and pull it out, that's what it is. In any event, when you do that, there's only certain types of things that you can ask for requests. So, for instance, he can only get official email accounts. So Ellen Weaver's personal email accounts would not be part of that. And after he's looked through the emails, Representative Johnson believes that something's not adding up. Basically, that he believes the conversation started either offline somehow, phone call, maybe at a convention or something, or it was conducted through personal emails, or at least Ellen Weaver's personal email. Because it seems like, according to him, that the correspondence he does have that show their initial contact, it almost seems like there was already something in the works. So that is what he is saying. Post and Courier, they didn't independently verify that. Maybe they will at a future time, or another media outlet will. But according to Representative Johnson, he thinks that they've been using, private emails, or at least Weaver was, to circumvent the state's Freedom of Information Act. Like I said, private accounts like that are not subject to FOIA requests. So the correspondence that he did receive from the State Department of Education as a result of that FOIA request does not appear to include what Johnson called a quote unquote origin email, in which the relationship is discussed and formalized, which is what I was alluding to before. And he thinks there must be more communications out there somewhere. Now, Weaver, for her part, did respond through an agency spokesman saying Johnson's quote misleading and political attacks are 100% wrong, end quote. Johnson said that his main concern is that South Carolina tax dollars might have been misused to support this private nonprofit organization that produces one sided politicized content with a stated mission to change minds, quote, by presenting an alternative to the leftist worldview, end quote. That is correct. Now, if you were listening and you were more right leaning, imagine what I just said was a state superintendent partnered with an organization, a private nonprofit organization. It's not a official. It's not a school. Even though it's called PragerU, it's not a school. And imagine I said that the state superintendent partnered with this organization that presents according to their stated mission. So this is the company itself saying it. That they are trying to change minds by presenting an alternative to the right wing worldview. You'd be really mad, I'm sure. And a lot of people would say, I knew it. They're indoctrinating our kids. Well, this is the opposite, of course. What's actually happening is they partner with an organization that says they're trying to present an alternative to the leftist worldview. This is clearly political. This isn't grounded in any unbiased education. This is a chance to tell different histories and narratives with a stated goal of opposing what the organization said is the leftist worldview, which, Weaver, she oversees the South Carolina schools. If she believed there was some leftist worldview, quote unquote, being taught, she could work to just eliminate that. And again, that would be wrong if there were uh, political agendas being injected into the school curriculum. That's not okay, regardless of which way, if it was happening, whether left leaning, right leaning, it's not okay. And this should be, no matter what your political beliefs, you should think this is extremely problematic and should not be happening. Now, to add to that, and again, there may be people who are right leaning that will listen to some of this and say, "Hey, I kind of like the idea of some of this." Well, of course, you're leaning that way. Just like I'm sure if there was left leaning stuff being put out there, some if the roles were reversed here, I would be like, "Yeah, yeah, that sounds pretty good." But if you take an objective view and you say, "Well, yeah, even though that's what I believe." There are people, this isn't like a set in stone thing. Like there's some things when it comes to education that no, this is just what it is, and there's no debate even though there might be a small minority of people. Like for instance, I'm just going to use something crazy here, not something specific, but like the moon landing, there's a very small portion of the population that believes, and by very small I mean proportionally, percentage wise, that it's a hoax. Well, that's not something that's taught in schools. Maybe they mention it in passing. There's some people believe it's a hoax, but they're teaching that this is a thing that actually occurred. This is not that. This isn't like extreme views like that, but it is leaning towards a particular political agenda, and that's not okay. PragerU's annual report opens with a Bible verse already, supposed to be separation of religion and schools, church and state, et cetera, and follows up with a statement from PragerU CEO, Marissa Street, that says, quote, the left is bound and determined to destroy the America we love, end quote. Again, take out left, put in right if you're a right leaning person, and tell me that you would be okay with that if that's what was going on. Of course you wouldn't be, and you shouldn't be. Just like this isn't okay. Nobody should be okay with it. That shouldn't be a program that is being put into schools. Now, I'm not saying that particular part is something that students would have access to. I'm not saying however this is going to roll out, they're going to see something that's going to say specifically that mission statement or maybe not mission statement from the CEO that just outwardly says the left is bound and determined to destroy America. That's not going to happen. That'd be wild if it did. I would be shocked because it would just make the case even easier to remove this. But the fact that that's the company CEO saying that is a statement on behalf of the company. it shows you that their content is not something that should be out there, not in schools, not in public schools. As I mentioned, PragerU is neither a school nor an accredited educational organization. In fact, it was co founded by a conservative radio talk show host named Dennis Prager, who doesn't have a background in education. And again, even if he did, the types of stuff that they put out there is wildly biased and oftentimes inaccurate. So, for a refresher, Weaver announced this partnership back on September 16th between the State Department of Education, saying it was entering this agreement with PragerU. And she said that some of its videos and other instructional materials had been approved for classrooms as an optional resource for teachers. So, it's not all their materials. So, I'm hoping at least that some of the more egregious examples that I've talked about in other episodes will not be available, and also the fact that they say this is optional. I'm hoping many, if not all, teachers just refuse to use it. But it's still troubling that it is an option based on what the company's stated goals are, what they believe, the type of content that they do have, and the fact that there could be a teacher who's uses this because of their own personal beliefs and political beliefs. As I mentioned, the original announcement prompted an outpouring of protest and questions from everyone from educators to parents and lawmakers, even some students who were concerned about what they claim, and I'm claiming, is PragerU's bias, the fact that there's factual errors, and so much more. It's just not an appropriate piece for education. Many critics, and I've looked up different articles and stuff and found some of PragerU's content online. So I can say that, yeah, I've seen this. A lot of it presents inaccurate or just wild accounts of history. And by wild, I mean inaccurate, exaggerated, uh, talking about things, that maybe you might be able to find an example where someone in history thought it was true, but it's not really. And, they kind of exaggerate minority opinions on things. And by minority opinions, I mean, again, let's say we're talking about the moon landing. A minority opinion in this country would be that it was a hoax. Again, I'm not talking that kind of conspiracy theory type stuff, but that's what I mean. Things that are pretty widely understood that this is the way it happened. This is the truth. This is the accurate historical context. And then there's a small opinion of people's, well, no, we actually believe this, that kind of stuff. One of the more egregious examples that I can remember when I was looking this stuff up was there was some kind of content with figures from history like Frederick Douglass or Christopher Columbus. And in these like cartoon, almost like comic strip looking material, they basically are making apologetic explanations for slavery. One said something along the lines of, "We're an enslaved people. They were able to learn certain tasks, and isn't it better to be enslaved than dead?" And just these ridiculous things. That's what I'm talking about. This is the kind of material that this place puts out. Again, important for me to mention, I'm not saying that material is one of the approved pieces for South Carolina. We don't know what's been approved so far, but that is something that the company puts out there. Some of the other examples, materials will downplay the severity of humans' influence on climate change, or it'll make the case that America was founded explicitly on the Judeo Christian value system, things that we know are not true. Humans do affect climate change, obviously, and this country was not explicitly founded on that value system. It was, freedom of religion was one of the main points, as we all know. Freedom of religion means it is not explicitly built on a specific religion. So it's content like that that's put out there that could potentially make its way into our schools in this state. And even if those specific examples are not, there are other maybe less egregious examples, less offensive examples. But again, with that shouldn't be available to students and a company with the stated goals and missions that it has. This is wild. And for those who are, let's own the libs and this is hilarious, this is, imagine the roles were reversed. I'm sure there are some people who think the roles were reversed and that schools were teaching all these leftist pieces of propaganda and stuff. For those people, I can't help you. But for those of us who know what actually happens in the schools we went to, now I didn't go to schools in South Carolina, but in my schools, I wasn't exposed to any political propaganda from either side. I have friends who are teachers in South Carolina and have been teachers here for nearly 2 decades at this point, and that's not happening in schools. So imagine though if roles were reversed and it was the opposite political party was in charge, you would be apoplectic that this is not okay, and it isn't. I'll let you know about any updates. In case you were wondering, yes, National Nancy, Representative Nancy Mace, is still furiously tweeting about bathrooms and making all sorts of anti-transgender comments and statements. Yes, it's still going on, almost exclusively, by the way. She has, sprinkled in some other things here and there. She's good for a Bible verse every Sunday. And she also has talked about a few other things. But by and large, she is still very much on this bathroom bill debate, with her hashtag hold the line and this just war against trans people. Yeah, it's still going on and it's escalated. And I don't mean necessarily that she's tweeting about it more than she did in that initial, what was it, like 3 or 4 days where it was like hundreds and hundreds of tweets that were sent out in a small window. Her rhetoric is escalating. It went from, don't get me wrong, it was biased, it was bigoted. She has gone full bigot on this issue. Some of her posts on Twitter were flagged for hateful conduct this past Friday, as she's continued this weeks long anti transgender crusade. One specific post used a slur for transgender people, which violates Twitter rules about hateful conduct. She had some other messages that were flagged. And like I'm not going to continue this conversation much further, but I wanted to let you know that her rhetoric is escalating. It's not just bigoted opinions and comments. It's now using slurs. I mean, any other group in this country, any other minority group in this country, if a representative was talking the way she was or he was, I'm saying she obviously in this case because it's Nancy Mace who we're talking about, and if somehow people were like, meh, we'll let it go, which it seems a lot of stuff is just this country's like, yeah, whatever. Um, if they escalated to using slurs against that group, there would be a huge reaction. There would be outcry from both sides. And when it comes to the LGBTQ community and specifically trans people, that outrage has been non existent. I shouldn't say non existent, but non existent from one side. And it's shameful. And this is unbecoming of a representative of Congress. And it's really sad that no one's really calling her out on her side of the aisle. It's shameful, like I said. Now, the point I always make in this conversation, you may agree with her stance, which is a trans woman should not be in the women's bathroom or locker room. You may agree with that. And that's not the argument I'm trying to make. That's a conversation for another day, another time. My main issue with this whole Mace thing, as I said, has been the way she's going about it. There is a way to raise questions about bathrooms or who should be able to participate in women's sports or girls' sports. There's a way to have that conversation regardless of which side of the aisle you are on, without demonizing an entire group of people, without using slurs against that group of people, talking out of one side of your mouth saying, hey, everyone should be given equal rights and opportunities. And as long as their rights aren't infringing on anyone else's. So that's like her excuse is she believes that a trans woman being in a woman's bathroom is infringing on a woman's rights. There's a way to have that conversation. And again, she's talking out both sides of her mouth. Sorry, that was my original point, saying that everyone deserves this, and then just going full bigot against a minority group. And we've talked about why that's dangerous. Rhetoric can lead to actions. Obviously, on the smaller scale, still important. It can influence opinions that people have. people who might not have really cared about this issue or really thought about trans people now are thinking that they're these monsters that are just lurking in women's bathrooms trying to attack women. It can have that effect, but more seriously, it can lead to violence against these groups. And in a state like South Carolina that still doesn't have hate crime legislation, when crimes against people in these groups happen, it's not being fully, litigated and looked at the way perhaps it should be or would be in other states who have that kind of legislation. I just don't understand. Besides the obvious, she wants attention. She's raising money. She wants to be on TV shows. We know this. She wants her own ex staff has talked about this. This isn't even speculation at this point. It's all about her. She wants to push her brand of herself to continue being famous and known. But this is one of the more disgusting ways that this has materialized under her. She'll say wild things here and there, but this is one of the more, again, dangerous things that she's done because it can lead to actions against this group. And there is a respectful way to do this. Even if you wildly disagree that no, trans women should not be banned from women's bathrooms. They are women, they deserve to be in there. You would at least be like, hey, at least she's approaching this in a respectful way. But there's no pretense. She is just she's not holding back. And she is, like I said, just gone full on bigot. When you're using slurs and demonizing groups, alluding that this group just wants to attack women, she has gone, she already crossed the line, but this is just unreal. And I hope that people who maybe, like I said, agree with her, the basis of what she's saying, can see that this is not the way to do it. This is unacceptable, unbecoming of a member of Congress. Not that we should be surprised at this point, but it's really, really disgusting. Had a couple other stories to get to, but I don't have a lot of time, so I'll just quickly go through it. One is an update on the monkeys that are, that have been escaped from the Alpha Genesis lab over in Yemassee. There are still, as of this recording, and I should say, as far as we know, because Alpha Genesis has kind of stopped providing updates. So as far as we know, there are still 4 young rhesus monkeys still on the loose somewhere. As I said, Alpha Genesis really isn't talking anymore. The breakout of these 43 monkeys happened on November 6th, apparently from an open gate. And many of them were captured. Like I said, they're down to 4. But over the last couple weeks or so, Alpha Genesis has really just not been coming out with any more information. So that's where we're at that situation. In addition to that, as I mentioned on a previous podcast, apparently the USDA is looking into this facility. PETA has apparently obtained pictures. They actually sent me a press release with those pictures, which are graphic. And I have not shared them. I've chosen not to at this point, but of monkeys that have died allegedly under the care of Alpha Genesis in this heater accident. So that they said they're sending those photos, which came from a whistleblower, as well as some other information to the USDA. We'll see what happens there. Hopefully there'll be some sort of announcement at some point if there is an investigation and what they found. But as of right now, Alpha Genesis seems to basically have cut off all communications, so we don't really know what the latest update is. According to Yemassee Police Chief Gregory Alexander, the town is still getting calls about possible monkey sightings. They've gotten some in Ridgeland, for instance, which is 19 miles away. And they've also gotten some as far away as Florida. So, who knows how accurate those are or if the monkeys are still just sort of on the property. But that's where we're at with that story. And the last story today, of course, while we're doing updates about National Nancy, about the escape monkeys, we got to do Murdaugh, right? Murdaugh murders. Moselle, that's a lot of M's. Moselle, the former estate of the infamous convicted murderer Alex Murdaugh, is back up for sale again. The over 5,000 square foot home and surrounding area were listed for $2.7 million on Friday. So the property is being described as completely overhauled and expanded. The estate home sale is part of a deal that included the original 1,700 acres for $2.6 million in March of 2023. But 21 acres which included the house, were sold for $1 million after an auction in February 2024. That supposedly was to become a horse farm. So now, after all of that, this new listing highlights the estate's large horse paddocks, two barns, a tractor shed, and an airplane hangar, and it's listed for that $2.75 million. So again, it does appear that it has been overhauled, not just taking the group who's selling it their word for it. It does seem they've made some changes. Although the airplane, there was like a landing strip that was already there. But yeah, after just a little while, it's already back up for sale. We'll see what happens to this infamous property. If you don't remember, it became infamous because Maggie Murdaugh, who was Alec Murdaugh's wife at the time, and their son Paul were murdered near dog kennels on that property back in 2021. Alec Murdaugh was the one who was convicted of both of their murders. That happened back in March of 2023. So that's the latest on the Murdaugh saga. I'm sure there'll be more as we go forward, and plenty more, perhaps with monkeys, and without a doubt, more about Nancy Mace. But you should be all caught up with all the news now. That'll do it for this edition of Holy City Sinner Radio. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Sinner Radio. And a big thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear as well. If you have a moment, please rate and review, like, subscribe, all the things that you can do on whatever platform you're listening to the show on right now. Please do them. It's a big help, and I greatly appreciate it. I'll be back with you on Friday. We still got some stories that I wasn't able to get to because I like to talk too much. What? A guy with a podcast talking too much? My apologies to you and my producer, Lindsay Collins, for, I get these topics and I keep going and expanding on. I'm like, nope, we're going to cut it down. I got to give my opinion. I'm sorry. I can't help it. I hope you don't mind. For more of that, and hopefully I'll do better to cut down for y'all on Friday. But until then, good night and good luck.